Hello again, friends, and thank you for joining us on a beautiful Labor Day Monday here in Chicago, Illinois. I'm joined by Matt Kusek,
Hey, everybody.
and we're going to taste some whiskey and just kind of tell you what we think about it.
Yeah.
So today we have Old Grandad, which is one that I have reviewed for you before. We've talked about the Old Grandad bottled in bond, but this is something really special. So Scott sent around a Old Grandad that is 86 proof, and it comes from the year 1987. So we're getting in the Wayback Machine today. I'm going to taste a dusty bottle of bourbon. Now, this was actually distilled at the Old Grandad Distillery, which is DSP KY14. And this bottling is from the year that was actually sold to Jim Beam as part of the acquisition of National Distillers. And it is Beam, as you know, that continues to produce Old Grandad with that high rye mash bill today. So I'm going to quit talking and just kind of chat about the whiskey. So we're going to start with the 87 here.
Yeah.
Again, Scott generously sent through the sample, so thank you, Scott. It's a continual source of wonderful whiskey for us. The color, Matt noted, was this beautiful kind of like orangey, amber, auburn. I don't know, what would you call that?
Yeah, I mean, it is an orange amber. I mean, as soon as you poured it, I just kind of noticed that difference, just how much deeper and darker it is. It made me ask you if there was an age statement, but we couldn't find an age statement. Obviously not on the current one.
You'd have to imagine that given what was going on at that point in time, that this would have been older stocks. There was no shortage of bourbon to be able to.
Right,
to
single
blend
barrels
the
were just taking off in '86, right? '86 is the first year of Blanton's, right?
Is that right?
So, I mean, we're just talking single barrels. Age statements probably weren't even a thing back then.
So there's every reason to believe that this was some potentially older stock.
Do you feel age statements come about because of the Scotch boom? Because Scotch got popular, like in the early 2000s? When would you say the Scotch boom was?
Yeah, no. So the earliest kind of single malts were coming out in the 60s with age statements and through the 80s, and that was kind of the takeoff. I think it's because so I'm maximally cynical about this. I think it's because Americans we like numbers. We like, we know that if Robert Parker gives something a 99, that's better than a 98 or
Right.
whatever. So 18 years has to be better than 12 years, right? 25 years better than both. So.
And God forbid you grade something with an A, B, or C.
Well, so we get a lot of, speaking of numbers, get a lot of problems for that at malt. But okay, so I'm getting a lot of those. And I talked about this with the Old Weller Antique 107 from the 70s. Those richer, really fulsome, kind of sticky, sweet, almost like a maple syrupy kind of aromas here.
Do you subscribe to the theory of older barrels back then perhaps aged it a little bit better? There was more interaction. Maybe that's why you get a deeper color. Maybe why you get more of that maple syrup.
Yeah. So I was asking David Jennings about this, and it's with the under the broad heading of what's different about dusty whiskey, and the answer is everything. I mean, production processes, grain sources. Wild Turkey, for example, had these cedar fermentation tanks, and I know Stitzel Weller did as well, that were just imparted this crazy, like, musty flavor to it. So,
does anybody know if the distillation, the tools used by National Distillers was that much different than what Beam probably is using?
Yeah, so it's Beam is a big industrial distillery with state-of-the-art technology, and National Distillers was the Old Grandad Distillery had been around a long time, so there's every reason to believe there wasn't as much stainless steel involved. There's probably more copper. I'm speculating here, I don't know this for sure.
Absolutely.
But,
and this is something for me where I start to think about the reason that the wood might have been different, and this is the beauty of whiskey, right? Like whiskey, it could have been anything, right? Like whether you're Woodford Reserve and using pot stills, or heat-controlled warehouses versus aging out, or being on a pallet versus a rick, and there's all these kinds of like variables that we think about. And it's just for something that's 86 proof, there's tannins in there, and for me, it takes me a while to discern what's tannic and what's alcohol. Like sometimes that blends for me.
For me, tannic is way more about the texture. It's this kind of like grainy, like astringency. I don't mean grainy in the sense of grain alcohol, but like it's got a kind of a rough texture to it a little bit, like that kind of mouth drying. Like if you ever think about like black tea, that kind of dried out aftertaste you get with black tea. That to me is tannins. But so yeah, it's a lot of fun to nose. The palate's very subtle.
Yeah, I can't say that there's much that jumps out outside of those wood or tannic notes for me.
There's a little bit of, I get like a little spearmint, like mint leaf maybe on the very front of the mouth, and then there's some
on the entry.
Yes, exactly. And then there's some kind of vaguely fruity kind of flavors.
I don't want to call it juicy fruit, but
that's great. No, you know what? I think you hit the nail on the head there. I had Recently, one that reminded me of Big Red gum. My dad had that fat pack of Big Red gum in the car, and we used to always chew that when we were driving around with him. So Juicy Fruit's another great one from the Wrigley stable.
I'm still on the hunt for those whiskeys that have those bubblegum notes that people talk about.
Oh yeah, man! I got a. In fact, I'll give you some. It's inside. It's the new riff that. Yeah, I don't know if it's bubblegum or if it's like we call it like grape soda, like that like store like that Jewel's grape soda you used to get when you were a kid, like the off-brand grape soda. But
you know, it's funny. On one of my series, I just did a mix of New Riff with Jelly Belly makes a sparkling watermelon.
Okay.
I know this is sacrilege for all the hardcore whiskey folks.
Like a sparkling watermelon beverage.
It's a sparkling watermelon beverage.
No way. Okay.
Jelly Belly brand, and with New Riff, it's just unbelievable.
I'll tell you what, I'm a big believer in freedom of religion, as you guys will know. If you want to mix your whiskey with whatever, you go right ahead. I'm not going to tell you.
Booker Nose says anywhere you like.
Yeah, no, as long as you're drinking out of the glass, the side of the glass that's closest to your face, you're doing it just fine. It does not matter to me what else you do with it. But
you know, by the way, I tore through this 86 proof. It goes down very easily.
It is delicious. Yeah, I've been trying to pace myself a little bit, but it's very the British have a word for this, which is Moorish, which is like that. You know, when you have like a mouthful of candy, you're like, oh, I just want more of that.
Yes.
Like that very sweet kind of deliciousness.
So we're moving on now to the Old Granddad.
Gotta keep it moving along.
Yep. Okay. So this is the 80 proof. We noted the lighter color.
I'll tell you what. Immediately, just so much more like grain driven. Oh, by the way, I've been informed by my many critics that people love to see bottles in the shot. So I'm going to just, at the risk of disturbing the camera there, I'm going to just give you the bottle shot. So this is, I think I paid $15 for this. So this is your bog standard 80 proof, Old Granddad, bottom shelf, plastic cap on there. It is nothing fancy about this, but
good thing about plastic caps, you can store them sideways.
This is true. You don't have to worry about that cork deterioration. Yeah. And it's funny, because I've been doing it wrong for years, because I got started out in wine, and wine was meant to store sideways to keep that cork moist, but with whiskey it's exactly the opposite.
Yeah, because there's just so much alcohol content. Or maybe there's something, well, obviously we're talking about 80 proof versus something way lower in wine.
Yeah,
so
right.
It would be way different. Do you notice a difference with the synthetic corks?
You're saying in terms of the flavor of the wine? Yeah, I mean, you can't really control for that variable, right? Because you would need to find the same wine that had been bottled with both a synthetic and an organic cork.
Yeah, to your point on this nose, like corn grains.
Corn.
I'm not getting. Whereas this had like a little bit of a campfire going to it, like it took me out to the woods. On the nose, this is not as much.
Tastes like cheap whiskey. No offense to anybody.
Hey.
No, you know what? Look, I've been on Front Street about this before. Like Old Granddad and that high rye mash bill, like I struggle with it. They can get really hard edged and really astringent. I think like the 114 is just too much for me. It's like I appreciate what it is, and for people that like that profile, that is ideal for them. But
yeah, but there's something that happens here for something that's only 80 proof, and the alcohol, like somebody might call this a long finish, but this is a long alcohol finish. Like I have alcohol just sitting here, and it's only 80 proof. It's not even good alcohol. No offense to the Granddad lovers there.
I mean, it's look, it is what it is. I think for this is certainly not awful or revolting in the way where you're like, oh man, like I'm not gonna pour this down the drain. This will go into cocktails or I don't know what, hot toddy or something. But
I think hot toddy, right? Because this would be too weak in a cocktail. I think at 80 proof.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on It does have the I had said this I think in the review of the bottled and bond. Like if you have, I tend to make like Manhattans a little on the sweeter side. I use Amaro instead of vermouth, which can be sweeter, stickier depending on the style you get. And that high rye in the mash bill really cuts through that nicely. But yeah, like you said, you'd like something a little more potent, ideally.
Agreed, and I prefer my cocktails on the sweeter side just because if I wanted to taste alcohol, I would drink a straight.
Fair enough.
Right? Like that's the point of a cocktail, right?
I don't actually know what the point of a cocktail. There's all sorts of debate about this or what you should do. So.
Well, for me, and that's why I'm the lazy man. Like I'm either going to drink this neat on the rocks or I'm going to mix it with one thing, and that's kind of the reason it's sacrilege for what I'm doing with the Binge and Bartend series. Hi guys, shout out to EC Sports, follow those guys if you can. I wanted to do something different. They're like, hey, we're doing cocktails. We're binging Ozarks or we're binging some other show, and we want guys to come in and come up with these cocktails. And I'm like, nobody's talking about just simple mixers.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one is the Bullet, the Blender Select I've got.
Oh, yeah.
I love it straight up, and then I just poured it into some Coke, and it disappeared.
Oh, interesting, okay.
Yeah, it disappeared, even though, it's a fantastic whiskey by itself, so that's just something to note there.
I had done a review of a Kalila that was not a great single cask of Kalila, but when I put it in a highball, it was really delicious, so I'm open-minded about all that kind of stuff.
There's something about this finish in the older one. It just it kind of wafts through the mouth, wafts through your flavor wheel, like
So I'm going back. I've been to the bottom of the valley here now. I'm going back to the top of the mountain with the National Distillers one. Oh man, that nose is just miles away. I see what you that campfire, that sort of dried wood that's or like embers or charred, the charred.
And that's why you're the professional writer, because I thought of a campfire and you're able to break it down even more. No, that's about right. I love it.
That's a note I get a lot actually. I abuse, some would probably say, campfire a lot.
But it's hard not to abuse things, because when you think about it, right, like bourbon in itself, you're only dealing with like 4 or 5 different ingredients. You break down maybe like the different ways of aging.
Yeah, sure.
You're going to come up with a lot of the same notes in a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's what I was trying to highlight recently. I led a tasting for some people that were whiskey geniuses. I mean, these people were really accomplished whiskey drinkers, but mostly Scotch and Japanese, very little bourbon. And I was saying to them, like, look, you're pretty. There's a lot of stricture legally and just traditionally around what kind of grains you're using, how what the process is like, and so forth, barrel entry proof and all that, and yet you're amazingly able to coax this incredible range of flavors out of the same ingredients, same raw material inputs. And I think we were tasting from different distilleries, different types of expressions, and I think they got a sense of that. So yeah, I mean it's and then particularly over time, and as we've talked about before with the changed production methods and some of the the different kinds of equipment that were being used, it's miles apart in terms of what you get out at the end.
Now I'll say this: as I go back to the modern Old Granddad, and maybe we should drop the nugget that the guy on the front.
Go right ahead.
The guy on the front is Basil Hayden. Every time somebody brings out his Old Granddad, it's like a rule. It's like a bourbon rule. You got to talk about that.
Meredith Basil Hayden Sr.
That's right, and you're paying more for less proof. But hey, I see why people go to this as a shelf. I can see it for $25.
Yeah,
I can understand it. No hate here at 80 proof. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean
it's fine. It doesn't offend.
No, look. I won't be buying another bottle of this anytime soon. But for the purposes of this comparison,
For science.
For science, very good. Yeah, I wanted to be able to speak knowledgeably about what is it, in yesteryear and today. So we have it.
And you know what I hate you for right now?
Oh,
So I was at a recent barrel pick. We were doing a barrel pick, and they kept talking about Dusties. And my rule has always been I've stayed away from Dusties. I don't chase Dusties.
Okay.
And the reason is almost for the same reason I don't chase MGP stuff. I cannot get it again. I won't be able to replicate it if I love it.
I see.
I'm totally guilty. I have a ton of bottles in my basement with this much left in it.
Yeah,
Right?
okay,
I'm
got
just constantly leaving. This is delicious. That 87. I do like it.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, if I had to score this, I would put this probably. I mean, it's definitely not as good as the Old Weller Antique 107 from '73. It's probably another addition via acquisition to the Jim Beam stable was Old Crow, and this reminds me a lot of the Old Crow ceramic chessmen decanter that was a generous gift from Brett, but that was from 1969.
Wow.
So and this is more along those lines. It's not quite as exuberant as this. Might even be even more sort of like luscious on the nose, but yeah, no. And look, I mean, I don't review Dusty's with the idea of saying like, hey, you got to go out there and pay $7,000 for this or whatever, right? Like it's educational. It gives you a glimpse into the past. People, I don't own any myself. People have shared them with me very generously, and
it's a great community.
It is, and I'm very, very glad you were able to make it over today and to join me for this.
Thank you for having me.
No, everybody is so generous with their time, so generous with their expertise, so generous with their actual whiskey, and I love to always end these on a note of gratitude. So, unless you got anything else to say, man, just thank you, Scott. Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Matt,
for coming over. My pleasure entirely.
And we are outside, and we are socially distanced.
Yes,
he's up front,
doing this
the back,
the right way.
Because I'm bigger and fatter. So
6 feet between us. Don't beat yourself up.
There you go.
But thanks again, friends, for joining us, and we'll keep doing these as long as you keep liking them. But anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Yeah.
You can follow me at Matt Kusek, and that's it.
Excellent.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.